and he had the middle seat in the back, in the far row. In the back of the plane you get the engines. He was a wealthy guy, and he figured, like, I'll go economy class, big deal. He realized this is really bad. He goes over to the steward. He said, "Can you please upgrade me? I'll pay." The steward looks at him. She says, this. He says, "There's plenty of seats in first class. Here's my gold card." Hands it his platinum card, and he says, "Whatever it is, just put me in first class. I can't take it here." She says, "I'm sorry, sir. Once we're airborne, there's no way you can upgrade." That means once we're airborne, once we leave this world, that's it. What we bought into is who we are. So it's good that we're now finally, once we get started, we don't want anybody who's tuning in from afar to have to board the flight en route, because en route you can't board. That's it. Right. It is what it is. Anyway, we are discussing a very important topic, and that is finding the diamond in the haystack. It's a diamond, but it's a haystack. What do I mean? It's a haystack. Base ace of Lakash. We'll talk about it in a moment. But in this week's parasha, we find a tragic episode at the end of the parasha. Bilam gives some terrible advice to Balak, with tragic consequences, and he says, the Jewish people, they've been living in this incubator, in this spiritual bubble for 40 years in the wilderness. I think you need to excite their senses and their hormones a little bit. Get them trapped. Pull them in. And he gives them the advice we talked about with the daughters of Midian, who were dressed very provocatively, and they ensnared the Jewish people into their X-rated, darkened tents and nightclubs and gentlemen clubs, and the Jewish people fell terribly, and a terrible plague ensued. And if we think about it, the words of Bilam to Balak are L'cha i'atzecha. Let me give you a little advice. Es asher ekra lachem ba'achris hayamim. That which will transpire at the end of days. At the end of days. And the commentaries say, the advice that he gave him, as Rashi tells us, the sages tell us, the advice that he gave him, put some women out there, engage them in business. Though every Jew likes a bargain, put up the stalls, make a little flea market. And, behind the scenes there are these girls that are very provocatively dressed, and they'll pull them into the tent, and sure enough, before long, you got them. That is Eis Asher Ekra Lachem. That's what will happen at Ba'achris Hayamim, at the end of days. Ekra, it'll seem like a coincidence, but really it's divinely engineered. And in our generation, we witness a drop of moral standards, such a precipitous drop, such a generation where never before has deviancy not simply been played down, but been celebrated. It's celebrated. So we lose our Hein Am Levad Ad Yishkan. We're a nation that stands apart. We're a holy nation. We're a separate nation. We're a unique nation. And it's very easy because we live in such an all-accepting, pluralistic society that supposedly embraces everybody. When we want to feel part of the madding crowd, it's very easy to lose our sensitivities and get sucked into the mindset, the cultural mindset, the sexual revolution that has been playing out since the 60s or whatever. And we wonder, at the end of the day, we want to enter into the promised land. We want to be ready to greet Mashiach. But Vayitzomet Yisrael Balpur, the Jewish people, or an element of the Jewish people, Vayitzomet, they were stuck. They were completely a part of the Balpur. We talked about the Avodah Zarah of Balpur, the freedom of expression. Do whatever you want. Celebrate your senses. Mardi Gras. Have no inhibitions. We talked about the idea of tzomit as the lid of a vessel. We are stuck because once someone gets in the rut of watching, absorbing, exciting oneself on sights, on the forbidden fruits of the Eitz Hadas, it becomes a part of the person, just like the original sin, just like the apple, just like the Eitz Hadas of Adam that inculcated within him good and bad. And now it was an internal struggle. So too, this becomes an internal struggle. It's a whole different world. After one's tasted the forbidden fruits, it's hard. Just like Adam dunked himself in the Nahar Dinar, in the river that flowed from Eden. We talked about that in the past. Constantly trying to regain and reattain. And that's how he realized his greatness. In a sense, that's, for many of us, the challenge of our generation, where, any creature comfort that we become acclimated to, it becomes a part of us. Can't get out of it. That's it. We've tasted it. It's too hard to be without it. It could be anything. Can you imagine in a car, you have a car that, one of those old gear shift, no air conditioning kind of cars. Who would buy a car today without air conditioning? It's torture. If you're used to like a little comfortable, you upgrade a little bit. You got your Bluetooth. You got just some basics. It's standard equipment. And now you don't. Imagine going back to a computer with a 56K modem. Torture. You have to wait. Let's say just a couple of years ago, you got to wait 10 seconds till the screen opens up. Climbing out of the box! Because we're used to something now, instant streaming. We expect it. It becomes a part of us. Everything we experience in the material dimension becomes an actual part of us, and it's so hard to disengage. It becomes Vayitzomet Yisrael. It's a tzomit. It's like the lid to a vessel. It's true, it's separate. It could be separated. But it becomes an integral part. We can't manage it. Everybody's walking around with their iPhones. God forbid if the iPhone's lost. They're like lost in the forest. Help! What happened to life? What happened to life? You see the tension. Yesterday I was in the city, just in the elevator, in a building there, and people, like, the minute they come in, I don't know, people have just kind of bechlal zombied, just become automated people, but the walking in, the walking out. What happened? And we are being programmed. We are being exploited. It's the biggest rip-off, the generational rip-off, because we can't anymore appreciate, celebrate who we are, what we're about. Mind-blowing. We've lost our self-dignity, our self-appreciation, who we are as individuals. We're being told a set of values constantly that if we don't adhere to these principles that are politically correct, who are we? It's so hard. because we're constantly bombarded with images and messages. And our minds are being programmed and acclimated to a certain sense of what stimulates us and what doesn't stimulate us, what we need and what we don't need. We've lost the inner dimension. We're celebrating an external, empty, shallow shell. It's mind-blowing. Hard to speak about it because we're so programmed that we don't want to hear it. We don't want to think about it. You know, in the city of Chelm is the famous place where we all make jokes about. But in the town of Chelm, the simple town folk, there was one fellow that he really had a little bit of an identity crisis. Wasn't sure exactly who he was. Wasn't sure he really existed. You know, the old philosophical question, can you really prove that you really exist? Prove it. Anyway, so he's in the mikvah. Now, while he's dressed, you know, he knows he's got his size suit and it's got that label in. He knows he bought it. It's got the Nautica tie. He has the Klein belt, and he knows his shoes, those old Echo shoes. He knows exactly who he is. But when he takes off all his clothes, he really has an identity crisis. Like, what? Who am I? So he figured out, you know, like in the mikveh where he had to take off all his clothes, he had this brainwave. He knew what he was going to do was he's going to tie a little red string around his big toe. And that little red string is going to remind him all the time, so he knows who he is. He's not going to get mixed up with anyone else. He won't think that he's this one or that one. He's going to keep that red string tight. Took the string and he was tying it, you know, around his toe, and then he took off his clothes. And then he goes into the shower stalls there, you know, before the mikveh. And the suds and the soap and the water is all flying around on the floor, and some or other his string dislodged from his toe and it got stuck on someone else's toe. You have to look at this like a Schultz, like a cartoon strip, you know. You got to look at the Charlie, the Peanuts, you know. And he's looking at this fellow, the two of them in their birthday suits, and he's looking at this fellow, and the other fellow's looking at him quizzically. And he looks at the other fellow and he's looking down at his toe and he sees the red string. He says, I know who you are, but who am I? Who am I? I know who you are, but who am I? Oh, that is so profound. Such a perfect description of our generation. We think we know the celebrities, the newscasters, the anchors, the politicians. We think we know who they are. The great singers, entertainers. But we're wondering, like, who am I? And the millions of minions, we call them sheeples, because we, the people, have become sheeple. But we've lost ourselves in the process. And then there's a great danger, because when we lose ourselves, we grasp automatically other people's values in order to try and find ourselves in the madding crowd. We feel a sense of comfort that everybody else is doing it, so it's got to be good. Kind of provides us with an artificial sense of security. Got to be okay. Everybody was Vayitzamed Yisrael about Pur. It was a movement. Pur! A lot of things that contributed. I'm sure the sociologists at the time could have told you about what it's like to be 40 years in the wilderness eating man, living the restricted, ultra-religious lifestyle. And there's a lot of turbulence here. They're entering into the promised land. a transition is about to take place and there are subterranean currents of tension and pressure that contribute. You know, it's all bubbling beneath the surface. They need some release. There's always undercurrents. But if we have our hands on the wheel and we know who we are and we appreciate who we are, then they are soft waves that are rippling around our feet. And if we don't know who we are, there's a tempestuous storm that tosses our boat up and down. Because when the hands are not on the wheel tight, the boat is flying in all directions, and we're pulled here and we're pulled there, impulsively pulled anywhere and everywhere, wherever our eyes, hearts, or feelings just so desire. It's all about feelings. I'm not in the mood. I'm in the mood. Let's go. You see this, the more rich, the more affluent, the more indulgent people are, the harder it is for them to commit and exercise an element of self-control. I was speaking to a broker, one of the top brokers in Manhattan, who's a broker to a lot of stars. Now he's like A-Rod's exclusive broker and people like that. He told me it's like the strangest thing. You could call people, they cannot call you back for 3 months, then all of a sudden they're in the mood to speak to you, they'll speak to you, they'll go out with you, you have a great time, you have a wonderful meal together, and then you don't hear from them for 2 weeks, they're not in the mood. It's like, it's completely on a whim. They live their lives on a whim. It's mind-blowing, but that's what happens when you're living in the I world. And, you have no problems, lots of money. People are adulating you. But you yourself don't know what they're adulating. Deep down. You want to believe, you like to believe, but really deep down there's so much tension and self-disgust on the core inner level. Vayitzamid Yisrael Balpar. In the, must have said this before, but in the convention, there was a Aguda convention. It was an Aguda convention. And at the convention, there was the keynote session. There was a speaker. My friend told me this. I heard it from Rabbi Wozner. There was a speaker there at the keynote session, and he was just drooling on and on, carrying on. It was like he was must have been a very wealthy man or something, and they put him up there at the convention, gave him a key spot. He was carrying on and on for 45 minutes. People were going crazy. There was a guy in the front row. He turned to his friend next to him, to the guy next to him, and he said, "Who is that jerk that's carrying on and on? Who is he? Who does he think he is?" The fellow looks at him aghast and he says, "Do you know who he is?" He said, "No, who is he?" He said, "He's my dad." He went white, oh my gosh, what did I say? He said, "And do you know who I am?" He said, "No." He said, "Good!" He ran out. Do you know who I am? It's a question we all have to ask. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? I don't want to be swept downstream with what everybody else says I should be, or I should value, or I should dress, or I should think. I don't want to be manipulated. I want to celebrate who I am. And so it's so important to find out who we are. Do you know, in the generation before Mashiach, our generation, the Mishnah in Sota tells us, Hamalchus yehafech leminus. The Malchus, the kingdomship, royalty, yehafech will be turned leminus, to minus. heresy, denial of God. Minus. And Rav Tzadok HaKohen said, Hamalchus, our own internal kingdomship, will lose the beauty and the royalty that lies in our veins. Yehapach leminus. We will deny our greatness to ourselves. It's a deep thought. Because we're all malachim, we're all kings. When we left Egypt and we're standing before Sinai, Hashem says to us, in that moment of betrothal, V'atem tihiyu li, and you will be to me mamleches kohanim, a kingdomship of priests, a nation of priests. You're all going to be kings and priests. V'goy kodesh, and a holy nation. A holy nation. You're a special people. You're my chosen people. We have a unique bond, inseparable. Royalty flows in your veins. You know, the Queen of England, it could be a nice hot summer's day, boiling, and she's dressed like she comes out of Brooklyn. You notice the Queen of England? She's never flaunting and broadcasting her body, even in her younger years. Her dresses could have been there, sold in the store here in Muncie, and I'm 59. Because it's unbecoming. I'm not going to flaunt myself. I'm a queen. We've lost an appreciation of who we are, so we need attention, generation of attention seekers. You know, the famous Midrash, I must have quoted this before, but the Midrash Rabbi tells us there were two rivers flowing in ancient Bavel in Babylon today. They're called the Euphrates and the Tigris. They're called in the time of Chazal Pras. Euphrates is the river Pras, ancient rivers, and the Tigris is the Chidekel. From time immemorial, the Torah tells us about these rivers. And the Pras is very interesting. It flows gently and gracefully. The Chidekel, the waters are always choppy and churning. On the banks of the river Euphrates is very fertile land. On the banks of the Tigris is much more arid land. And the Midrash says they asked the Euphrates, we don't know who they ask, if it's just a conceptual, an idea that's being given over to us on a deeper level. But they asked the Euphrates, Lama mimecha yafin, how are your waters? Why are you so quiet? Why don't you express yourself at all? And the Euphrates says, the Pras says, why do I need to make noise? My deeds show for themselves. Look, on the banks of my rivers, everything's grown so beautifully. I don't need to flaunt and make excitement. And they went to the Chidekel and they said, Chidekel, why are you making so much noise? And the Chidekel says, because I want everybody to see me. I want everybody to hear me. I want to be noticed. Do we need to say more? If we are kings, if royalty lies in our veins, do we need to show everybody and prove who I am? I am who I am. It is. I'm going in the airport. I'm going in public places. I'm walking. You know, on Shabbos, I remember not so long ago, I was walking back on Shabbos from Or Sameach. I had to be here for Shabbos day, and I'm walking. It was a sweltering hot summer's day, and I'm walking with my Streimel and my long Bekisha, and there was a convertible with a couple appropriately dressed for the summer driving past me, and I saw they were just like gawking at this specimen from outer space that's dressed for polar conditions here in the sweltering summer. And I was thinking to myself, strange, but I don't feel hot. I don't feel encumbered, because in my mind, that was for me, that was my appropriate dress for Shabbos. This is royalty on Shabbos. This was my Masorah. When I got home, the air conditioning is blasting. I automatically, okay, But out there, I didn't feel uncomfortable. Because our mind is, the mind is programmed in a certain way. Then we don't think, otherwise the Queen of England doesn't think that she should be dressed in beach clothing when she's out there opening a hospital in the sweltering heat or another airport terminal and cutting the red ribbon and all the dignitaries are around. She's the Queen. She reflects dignity and self-worth. She doesn't have to prove it to anybody. She doesn't have a last name. She's in the House of Windsor. She doesn't have a name. She doesn't need a name. She's the Queen. We're struggling to find our identity. And so we're grasping at straws because it always seems everybody else has the red string and we're not sure who we are. For Atem, that's the Malchus that Yehafech Leminus. We've lost that sense of Malchus. Persons in the airport, public place with thousands of people milling around, walking the streets of Manhattan. And everything beckons. When we have a low sense of self-esteem in our own identity, then we are susceptible to all the wins and challenges. We're afraid of how we're being perceived and looked. We want to blend in. We don't want to catch undue attention where we may be discounted as being fanatical, fundamental, out of the ordinary, out of the loop. We don't need other people's approval. We're good. It used to be sometimes in the boiling hot weather, you're walking the busy streets of city or on vacation in some resort somewhere, and the flashing lights, the glitter, the glamour, the excitement of what's out there is playing on one's hormones. What are you supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? We're human beings. We're very excitable. Some will say, like the old Yiddish wives said, don't get close to the shiksa next door. But just spoke about the shiksa. Shiksa is a terrible expression. What's a shiksa?
Lizard.
A lizard. A reptile. She could say him. The shiksa. Basa chamurim besoram. The donkeys, the horses, they're beautiful groomed horses. You go to a horse farm. My wife likes horses. We recently went up to a horse races in northern Westchester. They had 3 days of all the wealthy dudes and folk from the tri-state area that have their little private horse farms in Connecticut. They're all there, with their trainers and all those beautiful horses racing. Very interesting. Beautiful races. And there too, all the riders dressed with their long breeches and their special hats and riding dress. It's a hot day. But they're in the army. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They don't have to dress cool. It's not about being chilled. They're proud. They're the rider, the jockey. But I'm looking at all these horses so perfectly groomed and washed, and their tails and manes looking just in perfect condition. Do I have any attraction? Am I really drawn to them? The horses. That's one way of looking at it. Doesn't always work. Doesn't always work. The Gemara tells us, in Pagabach Menuvel, if this Menuvel gets a hold of you, if we are being engulfed in all kinds of fantasies and thoughts, what should we do? The Gemara says, well, go to the Beis Medrash and study Torah. Torah is a good antidote. Very nice, thank you so much, but I can't even open the Gemara, never mind concentrate. Okay, says the Gemara, if that doesn't work, say the Shema. V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. I'm feeling so distant from God. I'm going to say the Shema and say, I love you, God. I'm selfless. Here I am. V'ahavta es Hashem. I think it's going to work. It ain't working. Well, the Gemara says, I'll give you the third thing. If that doesn't work, then Yazkir lo yom hamisa. Remember the day of death. Remember the day of death. Think of the day of death. Contemplate how my body will be wrapped in that talus, a lifeless clod of earth. And there I am being lowered in this thin pine casket down into the ground. All the stones and the earth clanking and clanging on the wood. Bang, bang, bang. And the people saying Kaddish upstairs on top. I'm down under 6 feet. And they all left, and it's dark. There's no electricity, no heating. The worms are coming. The creepy crawlies. And here I am, day after day. Wow, that's sobering. That's like, when the hormones are really excited, that cools it off. It's like going into a freezing cold shower. Wake up! Let's be real. Yes, Kilayas Yamamisa, remember, think about it, contemplate, ponder the day of death. But that's the third option. That's only the last resort. That's the parking brake when the car is rolling out of control down the hill. But that's not the first. That's not the ideal. We're supposed to live in a world of light. Positive. I'm a king. I'm a queen. We're special. We have a unique relationship with Hashem. I don't want to compromise my soul connectivity. I'm your representative. I'm imbued with these values because they define me. They are who I am. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkanusecha Yisrael. How goodly. Ohalecha Yaakov, your tents, Jacob. Mishkanusecha Yisrael. Every Jewish home is a mishkan. It doesn't allow anything and everything to be flaunted. It's not a place of material indulgences when the door is closed and the window shades are down. We can do what we want. It's a mishkan. It's a place, it's a mother of the divine presence. Bilam recognized it. He wants so much to destroy it. He's figuring out all kinds of ways to undermine the beauty, the glory, the greatness of the Jew. The greatness lies in the self-awareness. It doesn't mean I'm looking down at everybody else. It's not like a German Aryan superiority concept that everybody's created in the image of God. Everybody's wonderful. I'm not looking down at everybody. I don't have to look at other people like they're horses or like they're donkeys or like they're materialistic or like they're self-indulgent or they're just, mindless masses. I don't have to knock others that they're the shiksa and the shaygets. I'm the king! It's past minish. There's a Yiddish expression. The best way to teach our children. Don't lecture. Role model. And if they do something inappropriate, just say, it's unbefitting for you. You're more than that. That's what Hashem is telling to us. We're much more than this. We're more than that. We don't have to chase all the empty dreams and skirts and nonsense. We're more than that. Shabbos is coming, and we're going to be one with Hashem. And we can be one with Hashem now. And we want to reflect our real identity, how we are for eternity and who we are for eternity here in this world. We're up to the task. We're going to stand tall and strong. We're not going to compromise ourselves all the time. And even if we do, we can get back on track because nobody can take away the royalty that flows in our veins. We're going to find the diamond in the haystack. Beis Esav Lakash is just hay. At the end of the day, it's so combustible. The diamond is forever. Good Shabbos, everybody!
Good Shabbos!
Wonderful Shabbos. Monday night, guys.